Hi, Joe Pantozzi here, and I am with my teammate, Chrissy Stevens. And today we are going to talk for a few minutes about your deduction and your contribution to 401ks. So Chrissy, you're familiar, generally speaking, with 401ks, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And probably most Americans are familiar with 401ks. And the thing is, the cliff kind of falls off once we say that. Because if you ask people for a follow-up question and say, well, what do you know about your 401k? How much can you put in? When do you stop? When do you start taking it? What's your deduction all about? Most people don't know. So here's a couple of things that I'd like to bring up. Number one, do you get a tax deduction for your contribution to your 401k? Now, most people would say, well, duh, that's the reason why I make a contribution to my 401k. Actually, that's not the reason you should make a contribution. The reason you should make a contribution is to put away money for the old person you're going to be one day. You're taking care of that old person, and maybe one of the first things that you should do is visualize that person. Invite that person to your kitchen table at dinner time. Set a plate for that person. Start thinking about who that person is, what that person looks like, what their desires and their dreams and their hopes and their personality is going to be, because you're going to be that person one day. And when you get there, if you don't start taking care of business today, that person is going to be somewhat sad, because they're not going to have the resources that they're going to need. Because when you're in retirement, we'll put it in quotes, when you're in retirement, when you're in independence season, every day is Saturday. And what I mean by that is you spend more money on vacation or you spend more money on Saturday than you do during the week. In retirement, 7 Saturdays. So start thinking about that older person. Now, back to the first question. Do I get a tax deduction? It depends, right? Do you consider a tax deduction some ginormous credit that you get on your taxes, or reduction in tax? Well, yeah, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Well, I don't know. Let's say that you're 35 years old and you're married. You got a couple of kids and you're making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. What tax bracket are you in? Well, I don't know. Well, if you don't know what tax bracket you're in, then you wouldn't know what your tax deduction is worth. See the way that works?
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm contributing to a 401k because I'm impressed with the idea of a tax deduction, and I'm in a 10% effective tax bracket, is there any attractiveness to a 10% tax deduction? It's just not a big deal. So if let's put some real numbers. I put $3,000 a year into it, $250 a month. Okay, $3,000. I'm getting a 10% tax deduction. Right? I'm saving $300. I'm not really impressed with that. What I should be impressed with is socking away tons and tons and tons of money for the old person you're going to be. Is that the most effective way of putting money away for the future? I don't know. That's not the subject for this conversation. I want you to be realistic about your 401k. So do you know what your 401k balance is today? Well, yeah, I could look at my statement. I probably have an idea. Okay, great. Do you know how much money you've put in to your 401k up to now? Hardly anybody has any idea how much they've put in. So if you don't know how much you've put in, but you know how much you have, you can't really tell me if you've made any money. Shouldn't you kind of have an idea that you're making money, not making money? Well, yeah, I got my statement, and my statement said I made 5.4% last year, or I lost 13 point something percent last year. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. 13% subtracted from what? 5% added to what? Are the numbers real? Have you done the math? If you don't know what you've put in, it doesn't make any difference how much is in there now. You need to know whether you've made a profit or a loss.
Right.
So the first thing I would ask you to do is think about why you're doing what you're doing. and determine whether a 10% tax deduction is worth it to lock up your money for the next 40 years. Because here's the other end. When you get to the other end, what the financial entertainers and purveyors have told people is that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you get into retirement. Therefore, the margin between those two, or the delta between what your deduction was and what your deduction will be, is going to make you money. So are you telling me that you're going to be in a lower than 10% tax bracket 40 years from now? Well, I have no way of knowing. Exactly.
Also, I don't want to be in a lower than 10% tax bracket when I'm older. I hope I will have earned enough to not be there.
There you go. And so what I say kind of humorously, I hope I'm humorous about this, is, hey, if you were in a lower tax bracket in retirement than you are now, you don't qualify to be our client. Because we don't want to have clients who intend to be poor. Right?
Right. Right.
The whole purpose of having a financial planner. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Say that again.
Because that just means we're not doing our jobs very well. We're helping you plan to be poor.
Right.
You don't need a plan to be poor. We can do that all by ourselves.
Yeah. Our job is to give you some sense, some wisdom, some skills, some mechanics maybe in how to get there. But first you have to know why. And you have to have a good idea that what you're doing in the first place makes sense for you. So let's leave it at that. Start thinking about getting an education on the plans that you're putting money into. Find out if you're deducting exactly what that deduction is worth, and then you can evaluate whether you like that or not. We can also talk about Roths and the part that they play in a 401k, if they do, right? And there are a lot more ins and outs to 401k and a retirement plan than people think. Right? Don't contribute to one because your neighbor's doing it, because your coworker's doing it, because all your friends are doing it. Then you're going to want to pick the investments that they pick for their own reasons. You should have your own investment choices for your own reasons.
I was wondering how the employer match plays into evaluating a 401k decision, because you're right, the tax deduction probably isn't it's not the whole picture, and it's not everything we should think about, but leaving free money on the table is no small thing. So how do we evaluate that portion of the decision?
Good point. Yeah, no one wants to leave free money on the table, least of all me. So let's take an example and say, just to put some real numbers into it, I'm making $80,000 a year, and I decide I can afford to put 6% of my pay into my 401k. So 6% times 80,000, $4,800 a year, $400 a month. And my employer says to me, if you put 6% in, I'm going to match 50% of that 6. So you put 6, I'm going to add an additional 3. Okay, that's great. Right. So I'm putting in 4,800. My employer is putting in an additional 2,400. Free money. No one likes to give that up. Now, that in and of itself is probably a good reason to consider putting money in a 401k. There's also some counterpoint to that. How long will my employer continue to contribute? Well, there's no guarantee, because business could go downhill. There could be a business reversal. The business could close. The employer could change his mind. He could bring in a new partner. She could bring a new partner in, change of management, change of philosophy, change of direction. Okay, so, all right, no harm, no foul. If my employer decides to cut my match, I could always cut my contribution. So really, I'm not hurting myself if I just say, I'm going to contribute my 6%, as long as the employer is matching 3% on top of it. Okay, that's reasonable, but there are more things to consider. And one of those things is, am I guaranteed to have a gain by the time I get to retirement? Am I guaranteed to have profit? Am I guaranteed that I've made money? Right? How much time will be between now, the time I put the money in, and the time I plan on taking it out? What's my desired, expected, anticipated retirement time? Well, I'd like to retire from my work at the same time that I'm eligible for Social Security, let's say. Let's say it's 67.
Mhm.
Okay, so what would happen hypothetically if the market takes the worst downturn ever in the year or two before your retirement target date? Well, I don't know. I wonder if that would affect me. Well, let's put some numbers into it. Let's say you had $500,000 in your 401k, which is way more than the average person has. It's even way more than the average 60-year-old has, because the average 60-year-old has maybe $200,000 in their 401k. A lot of 60-year-olds have a lot more than that, and a lot of 60-year-olds have a lot less. We're just picking a number, but I guarantee you a 60-year-old today has more in the 401k than the average 40-year-old or the average 30-year-old, right? So you're getting near retirement and the market goes negative. Now your 500,000 loses 30%, and now your 401k is at 350,000. So is that going to affect your decision to retire? Well, gee, maybe since I'm going to be able to take less from my 401k, maybe I should postpone retirement. Maybe I should work a couple of years and see, number one, if I could add more to the plan.
Mhm.
And let's see if the market recovers, right? Those are reasonable assumptions or expectations or desires or daydreams, but we don't know what's going to happen. It may be that the market takes 5 years to recover from those slumps. Well, am I going to keep on working another 5 years? I don't know. Maybe you have other components that come into your decision. Maybe it's a family issue. Maybe you want to take your family on a dream trip that you've always thought about, and you've been planning it to go to Europe for 2 months or something else that you love to do.
Mhm.
And now you've got to postpone that for several years. Well, maybe your health is not such that you can continue working, right? Maybe there are other reasons why you may not want to continue working, or you're not able to continue working. Maybe your company is closing. Maybe your position is being downsized. So these are all things that you need to think about, right? And you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what's going to happen 30 years from now. But one of the things that you're doing is you're locking money up now on the expectation that a certain set of circumstances is going to be to your favor.
Right.
So one question I would ask you is, do you think rich people plan that way? Do you think rich people plan on organizing their lives around the possibility of the market doing well or doing poorly? I'll bet they don't. I would say that very few rich people that I've met have made their money in the stock market. I'm not saying they don't have money in the stock market. They may have some in the stock market, but typically they have the lion's share of their wealth in their business, which is where they made most of their wealth. So now this leads us into another conversation for another day on various buckets of money that you should be thinking about. And we could say your Social Security is a bucket. Your safe savings is a bucket. Your 401k is a bucket. Your business, if you own a business, is a bucket. Your earned income could be a bucket, right? And so we don't want to think about kind of shoehorning our lives into a set of circumstances, all determined by what the 401k might do to us or for us.